We could only afford to save one of you, and your brother's the sure thing." My mother said that in the hospital discharge lounge, holding my coat for me like she was doing me a kindness. I'm 31. I have a heart that doesn't pump the way it should. A cardiomyopathy with a long name and a short fuse. And for 2 years, they had let it go untreated, the appeals unfiled, the premium quietly unpaid, while they moved the money to my younger brother's medical school. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice in that bright little room with the vending machine and the fake plant. I reached into the tote bag on my lap. Inside, it was a folder, and inside the folder were 2 pieces of paper. One was the itemized hospital bill. Every line, every code, the real cost of the body they decided not to spend on. The other was the insurance company's own statement, the explanation of benefits, with a date and a denial in 3 words stamped down the side in the insurer's own ink. My parents didn't know I had either one. They thought the girl in the wheelchair was too sick and too grateful to have been reading her own mail. They were so sure they'd managed it cleanly, so sure the only number anybody would ever see was my brother's tuition, paid in full, on time. Let me pour the coffee. You'll want to hear this one sitting down. I keep it for the nights the house gets too quiet. The nights you lie there doing the math on every sacrifice somebody told you they made for you and feel the cold spot where a different number should be. So tell me, before I go on, if your own parents had chosen, with a calculator, which of their children was worth saving, and you were holding the paper that proved it, would you have screamed? Or would you have laid it down quiet and made them read it themselves? Now, let me tell you how it began. My name is Claire. I grew up the older of 2, in a brick house in a town where everyone knew everyone's business except the business that mattered. My brother, Mark, came along 4 years after me, and from the hour he was born, he was the event. I don't say that bitterly, or I try not to. I've had a long time and a lot of quiet rooms to take the bitterness out of it and just look at the shape of the thing. Mark was bright and easy and golden, the kind of kid teachers email about. And somewhere very early, my parents made a decision about us that they never once said out loud. Mark was the investment. I was the overhead. You can live a whole childhood inside a decision like that and never see it, because it doesn't announce itself. It just distributes. Mark got the tutor. I got told I was a late bloomer. Mark got the trip with the science club. I got told money was tight that month. It was never cruel in any single instance. That's what I need you to understand before the rest of this makes sense. It was never one big slam door. It was 1,000 small redirections, each one reasonable on its own. All of them pointed the same way. By the time I was grown, I had stopped expecting to be the one the money went to. I had, God help me, started to believe that was fair, that Mark was the sure thing, and I was the one you didn't overspend on. I want to give you one picture from that childhood, because 1,000 small redirections is a thing you have to feel, not just hear. The Christmas I was 12, I asked for one thing, a secondhand keyboard from the music store downtown, $60 with the stand, and I had circled it in the flyer and left the flyer where my mother would see. Christmas morning, there was no keyboard. There was a cardigan, a nice one, the kind that says, "We thought about you without costing what thinking about you costs." And under the tree, for Mark, 8 years old, was a real telescope, the good brand, the one with the tripod and the box that took 2 hands to carry. I remember my mother watching my face while I opened the cardigan, and I remember deciding, 12 years old, and I made this decision like signing something, that I would be the kind of girl who didn't mind, who was easy, who didn't make a scene about a keyboard. I taught myself that morning to be cheap to love. And here's the detail I want you to hold, because it comes back. My grandmother was there that Christmas, my father's mother, in the armchair by the window, and she watched the whole thing, too. She didn't say anything in the room. But that afternoon, she found me in the kitchen, and she pressed 2 folded 20s into my hand and closed my fingers over them and said, You buy yourself that keyboard, Claire, and you don't tell your mother where the money came from. That was the first time anybody in that family looked at the arithmetic and quietly put a thumb on my side of the scale. It would not be the last. Remember the woman in the armchair. She matters more than anyone in this story knew at the time, including me. I left at 18 and built a small, real life with my own two hands. Community college, then a job doing the books for a heating and cooling company, then a little apartment with a cat and a window that got the morning light. I was proud of it. I didn't need them. And for a while, the distance worked. The way distance does until the year my body started keeping a secret I couldn't outrun. It started with the stairs. I'd get to the top of my own staircase and have to stand there with my hand on the wall, my heart going like something trapped, my lungs not filling all the way. Then it was the walk to the mailbox. Then it was waking at 3 a.m, gasping, sitting bolt upright in the dark with my hand pressed flat to my chest, certain. I was about to die in that apartment alone with the cat blinking at me from the foot of the bed. I was 29 when a cardiologist finally said the word. Cardiomyopathy, the heart muscle, stretched and weakened, not pumping right. Manageable, he said, with the right medication and the right monitoring and, if it came to it, a procedure. Manageable. That word would come to mean everything in this story, because manageable is only a promise if somebody's willing to pay for the management. And here is where I have to tell you the one thing that turned a hard diagnosis into a betrayal. And you're going to want to argue with me that it couldn't be legal. And I'll tell you the same thing the lawyer told me later, which is that the cruelest things a family does to each other almost never are. I was on my parents' health insurance. I want to explain that plainly because it's the hinge of the whole thing. When you're a young adult, the law lets you stay on a parent's family health plan until you turn 26. And even after, in some plans and some arrangements, a family can keep an adult child as a covered dependent if they're the policyholder and they keep paying. My father worked for the county. He had a good plan, the old solid kind. And when I got sick at 29, I was, through a tangle of paperwork and his pride about keeping the family covered, still a dependent on his policy. He was the policyholder. He paid the premium. He got the mail. Which meant that the machinery that decided whether my heart got treated did not run through me. It ran through him. At first, that felt like grace. I was scared and broke, and suddenly there was this safety net I'd half forgotten I was still inside of. My mother drove 4 hours to sit with me after the diagnosis. She cried in the cardiologist's parking lot and held my face in her hands and said, "We are going to take care of you, baby. That's what family does." And I believed her, because I was 29 and terrified and she was my mother, and a frightened person will believe the hand on her face over everything she's ever learned about whose hand it is. The treatment plan was clear. A specialist. A good one. Out of network. Because the in-network options where I lived were thin, and the cardiologist wanted me with someone who knew this exact disease. Regular monitoring. A medication regimen. Expensive but doable. And down the road, if the numbers kept slipping, a procedure to put a small device in my chest to keep the rhythm from doing the thing that kills people like me in their sleep. The out-of-network specialist meant fights with the insurance, prior authorizations, appeals, the patient responsibility balance that the plan wouldn't cover, and somebody had to pay. My father, the policyholder, the man who got the mail, told me he'd handle all of it. "Don't you worry about the insurance," he said. "You just rest. Let me deal with the paperwork." I was so relieved. I was so grateful. I handed him the keys to my own treatment and went back to bed. The same year, Mark got into medical school. I remember the phone call where my mother told me, the brightness in her voice a whole octave above how she'd sounded in the cardiologist's parking lot. Mark was going to be a doctor. Did I understand what that meant for this family? The tuition was staggering. A private program, the kind that costs more a year than I made, and Mark, being Mark, the sure thing, had gotten in but not gotten the money, and the family was going to make it happen because you do not let a thing like this slip away. I said congratulations. I meant it, even. I love my brother. None of what came next was his doing, and I need you to hold that, because it would have been so much simpler if I could have hated him, and I couldn't. What I didn't know, what I would not understand for almost 2 years, was that my treatment and Mark's tuition had just been placed on the same scale, and my father, the policyholder, the man who got the mail, had already done the arithmetic. Here is how you let a daughter's heart go untreated without ever once saying the words. You stop fighting the insurance. The out-of-network specialist needs prior authorization. You let it lapse. The denial comes. You don't appeal it. The patient responsibility balance comes due. You let it sit. And the premium, the actual monthly cost of keeping that adult dependent on the policy at all, you quietly stop paying it, and you let the coverage terminate. And you don't mention it because the person whose coverage it is 4 hours away and trusts you and is too sick and too tired to wonder why her own mother keeps saying, "The insurance is being difficult, baby. These things take time." I want to walk you through the rungs of it because it didn't happen all at once, and the slowness is the cruelty. The first wall was the specialist's preferred medication, the good one, the one that actually slows the kind of damage I had. It wasn't getting approved. My father said he was appealing it, and in the meantime, the cardiologist switched me to the cheaper one, the one that holds the line but doesn't push it back, and I took it gratefully because I thought it was temporary. It was not temporary. It was the new floor. Every month I told myself the good drug was one approval away. Every month my father said the magic words, "He's appealing it." And every month my heart muscle, on the cheap medication, stretched a little thinner in the dark while I slept. The second wall came at the monitoring. The specialist wanted me in every 8 weeks for an echo, to watch the numbers, to catch the slip before it became the fall. The appointments started getting harder to keep on the books. The authorization for the imaging didn't come through, baby. Reschedule, your father's on it. And so 8 weeks became 12, became 16, and the picture of my own heart that should have been getting taken regularly was instead being taken almost never, which meant that when the numbers slipped, nobody with a paid reason to look was looking. I remember sitting in the specialist's waiting room one afternoon, having driven the hour myself, and being told gently at the front desk that they couldn't see me today because the coverage was showing a problem on their end, and could I have my father call? I called him from the parking lot. He was so calm. He was always so calm. "I'll straighten it out, Claire. Go home and rest. You're working yourself up, and that's the worst thing for your heart." And the terrible genius of that sentence, "Go home, you're working yourself up, it's bad for your heart," is that it used the very thing they were neglecting as the reason I should stop asking about it. I drove home. I rested. I did the worst possible thing for myself, which was to obey. The third wall was the one that should have told me everything, and it almost did. It was the procedure, the device, the one I'd been putting off. The cardiologist had started to say the word now, not someday, but soon. The numbers were slipping. It was time to schedule. And every time it got close to scheduled, a new piece of documentation was suddenly required. They wanted more records. They wanted a second read of the imaging. They wanted a letter of medical necessity that kept not arriving. These things take time, baby. And I, who built ledgers for a living, who knew exactly how a stalling tactic looks when a vendor doesn't want to pay an invoice, I sat there and did not let myself see that I was being slow-walked by an expert, because the expert was my father, and the alternative was a truth I could not yet stand inside of. Every wall I hit, my father had a calm explanation, and every explanation pointed back at the insurance company, being slow, being difficult, being the villain, and not once at the man who had simply stopped feeding the machine. I want to be honest about the wallow here, because if I rush past it, you'll think I was sharper than I was. I wasn't. I was a sick, scared woman who wanted so badly to believe her parents had finally chosen her that I helped them hide it from me. I made their excuses to my own doctors. I apologized to the specialist's billing office for my dad still sorting out the coverage. I was the unpaid lawyer for the people letting me die slow. There were nights in that apartment, 3 in the morning, hand on my chest, where some animal part of me already knew the way you know weather coming in your bad knee, and I would say the excuse out loud to the dark to make the knowing stop. He's appealing it. He's handling it. They love me. They said they'd take care of me. The cat would blink at me and I would lie back down on a knowledge I wasn't ready to carry. There was one person in those months who didn't say the magic words. My Aunt Diane, my mother's younger sister, the one who never quite fit the family's smooth surface, who'd been divorced and didn't apologize for it and worked nights at a hospital 2 towns over as a billing coordinator. Diane called me one evening, out of nowhere, the way she did. And somewhere in the small talk she asked, too lightly, "And the insurance? Your treatment's all going through okay? No trouble with the claims?" And I gave her the line, my father's line, that it was being handled. The company was just slow. There was a pause on the phone that I didn't understand at the time. Diane worked in hospital billing. Diane knew exactly what being handled sounds like when it's true and exactly what it sounds like when it's a story. And she had just heard a story. "Okay, honey," she said. "You keep your own copies of everything, though. Promise me that. Even the ugly little statements that come in the mail. You keep them in a drawer." I laughed and said, "Sure, Aunt Diane," and didn't do it, because I didn't yet know I was building a case. But the woman who worked in billing had planted the one instruction that would save me, and I want you to hold on to her too, the way I told you to hold on to my grandmother, because the 2 women in this family who quietly tried to put a thumb on my side of the scale were not the ones anybody expected. The paper found me by accident. That's the part that still makes my hands go cold. About 16 months in, my mail got tangled. I'd moved apartments, set up forwarding, and a batch of things that should have gone to my father's address got routed to mine instead, because somewhere in the insurer's system I was still listed at an old address that forwarded to me. And in that batch was an explanation of benefits, an EOB. If you've never had a serious illness, you may not know what those are. They're the statements the insurance company sends after every claim, the ones that say, "Here's what was billed, here's what we covered, here's what we didn't, and why." They are dry, ugly, coded little documents, and they do not lie, because they are not trying to. They are just the truth with no feelings about it. The ugly little statements that come in the mail, the ones Diane had told me to keep in a drawer. I sat at my kitchen table with the morning light coming through that window I was proud of, and I read it. The claim. My cardiology treatment. The one my father had been appealing for months. Denied. And the reason code spelled out in plain language down the side because the law makes them spell it out. Coverage terminated. Premium unpaid. Below it, a second line. A patient responsibility balance. And a number. The itemized bill came 2 days later when I called the hospital billing office myself, shaking, and asked them to send me everything, every line, every code, going back to the beginning. The real cost of the body they'd decided not to spend on. $8,347 and the cents I won't bore you with, sitting unpaid, the treatment denied, the coverage dead, terminated, premium unpaid. In the exact window my brother's first year of tuition cleared. I did not call my mother and scream. I want you to mark that because it's the most important thing about who I decided to be in that kitchen. I sat very still and I let it be true. All of it. They had not been fighting the insurance company. They had been the insurance company. They had looked at 2 children on one scale, a daughter with a weak heart and a son with a bright future. And they had decided, with a calculator, that the responsible thing, the sure thing, was to let the overhead go and protect the investment. And then they had managed it so gently, so full of, "We'll take care of you, baby," that I'd spent a year and a half being grateful to them for it. There was one phone call I had to make before I could think straight, and it was not to my parents. I called Diane. I didn't even say hello. I said, "You knew." And she was quiet for a second, in that way she had, and then she said, "I suspected, honey. I didn't know. There's a difference, and I've been hating myself for staying on the right side of it." She told me then what she'd seen from where she sat, that she'd noticed, the year before, that my mother had stopped mentioning my appointments the way you stop mentioning a thing you'd rather not be asked about, and that the bragging had shifted entirely onto Mark, and that she'd called me that night and told me to keep my statements precisely because she could feel the shape of something and couldn't prove it and didn't have the standing to accuse her own sister of letting a niece's heart go on a story. "I should have driven to you," she said. "I should have shown up at your door and made you pull the file." I told myself it wasn't my place. I'll carry that. And then Diane, who worked in hospital billing, who knew this exact machinery from the inside, said the sentence that turned me from a grieving daughter into something with a spine. "You're an accountant, they forgot that, so here's what you do, and I'll help you do it. You don't fight them with feelings. You build the record. Every EOB, every denial, every premium lapse notice, every date. You build it the way you'd build it if you were going to hand it to an auditor who'd never met any of you, and you keep your face shut until it's done." I had an ally now. Not a loud one. The right kind. The kind who knew where the bodies were filed. And here is what I did instead of screaming. I made copies. 2 of everything, then a 3rd set I mailed to myself and never opened. Postmarked, the way you preserve a thing. I got a cheap accordion folder and I built the whole story in it, in order, the way I built the books for the heating company. Every EOB I could pull from the insurer's website now that I knew my own login, the denial, the terminated coverage, the unpaid premium history, the itemized bill, and the dates, all the dates, lining up against the tuition I knew to the dollar because my mother had bragged about paying it. Diane walked me through the parts I didn't know how to read. She told me which notice proves the premium was deliberately stopped rather than missed, which date stamp the insurer treats as the point of no return, how to request the full premium payment history so the gap showed in the company's own records and not just in my say-so. She did it on her nights off, on the phone in a low voice, a woman quietly helping take apart the thing her own sister had built. I'm an accountant by trade and by temperament. They had forgotten that. They'd spent so many years seeing me as the overhead that they forgot. The overhead knew how to read a ledger. I built the cleanest, quietest, most undeniable ledger of my life. And I told no one but Diane, and I kept going to my appointments, and I let my father keep saying he was handling it. Because I had finally understood the rule that runs under all of this. A person who's just learned the floor is rotten does not stamp on it to prove it. She finds out exactly how far the rot goes and where the one solid beam is, and she waits until everyone she needs is standing in the room. I had to get my own coverage, and that was its own quiet war. I went on my lunch breaks and got myself onto a real plan of my own policyholder, my own premium, paid by me, mailed to me, no one between me and my own heart ever again. It cost me. I picked up weekend hours at the heating company doing other people's books. I sold the car I liked and bought one I didn't. Diane, who could not give me money without my mother smelling it, did the next best thing. She found out which plan in my state actually covered my exact specialist and my exact procedure without a war over the out-of-network line, so that the money I did have went where it could do the most. But within a few months, the most important wall in this whole story came down. I was no longer a dependent on the man who decided I was overhead. You cannot keep handing your life to the person who's been spending it down. I took the keys back. Then I went, quietly, to the out-of-network specialist, the good one, and I told her the truth, all of it, the terminated coverage, the lost time, the months of the cheaper medication, and I watched a doctor's face do the thing a decent person's face does when she realizes what's been done to her patient. She didn't waste it on outrage. She said, "Then let's get you treated, starting now on your real plan." And she meant it, and for the first time in 2 years, somebody with my heart in their hands was paid to actually fight for it. The procedure I'd been putting off, the little device, the one that keeps the rhythm from doing the thing that kills people like me in their sleep. I finally had it, on my own insurance, in my own name. And that is how I came to be in that hospital, and how my parents came to be in that discharge lounge, because here is the part that I still can't fully explain even to myself. I let them come. The hospital had me listed with my parents as next of kin from the old days, and the staff called them when I was admitted, and my mother drove the 4 hours, and my father came, and I didn't stop them. Part of me, the sick, scared girl who still wanted the hand on her face, wanted them there. And part of me, the accountant, the one with the accordion folder in the tote bag on her lap, knew that a discharge lounge after a heart procedure was the one room where the truth could finally be read aloud, and there would be no calm explanation left that could survive it. Both of those were me. I've stopped pretending only one of them was. I told Diane I was going to do it. She was the only one I told. She asked me quietly, did I want her there in the room, and I thought about it for a long time, and I said no. Not because I didn't want her, but because this had to be mine, with my own hand laying down my own paper, and because she had already given me the only thing I needed from her, which was the record and the nerve to use it. "Then I'll be by the phone," she said. "And Claire, whatever your mother says in that room, you remember it isn't true, and you remember it never was. You are always worth saving. The numbers just say so out loud now." "Hold on to that," the thing the billing woman said, "because it's the lock that the rest of the door hangs on. Let me set the room for you because the smallness of it matters. A hospital discharge lounge is not a dramatic place. It's where they put you to wait for your ride after they've decided you're well enough to leave. A few chairs, a television bolted up in the corner playing something nobody watches, a vending machine, a sad plant, a window. I was in the wheelchair they make you sit in even when you can walk, the folder in the tote bag in my lap. My mother was fussing with my coat. My father was on his phone by the window, half here, and Mark was there, my brother. Home from his second year of medical school, taller than I remembered, a stethoscope-shaped future on him already. And he was the one variable my parents hadn't accounted for, because Mark did not know. They had never told the golden child what they'd melted down to gild him. He thought, that whole time, that my treatment was just being handled, the way everything in our family was handled, off in the part of the machine you don't look at. I want you to sit in that room with me for a moment before the fuse catches, because the waiting is the whole thing. I could feel the folder through the canvas of the tote bag against my thigh. I had read those 2 pages so many times I could have recited the reason code with my eyes closed, and now they were 18 inches from my mother's hand, and she had no idea, none, that the room had already changed shape, that she was standing inside a thing that was about to become undeniable, smiling, tucking a coat. My father was complaining mildly to someone on the phone about the parking structure. The television was running a commercial for a mattress. My own heart, my repaired, tended, finely defended heart, was beating steady and slow in my chest, with the little device keeping its time. And I remember thinking that this was the first conversation of my adult life I was about to have with a heart somebody had actually paid to protect, and that the somebody was me. The dramatic irony of it sat in my mouth like a coin. They thought the hard part was over. They thought the bill was buried. They were standing in the discharge lounge of the consequence, and they did not know the consequence had a folder. It was my mother who lit the fuse, the way the people who think they've won always do, by being too sure. She was tucking my coat around my shoulders, and she said, soft and warm and absolutely certain it was a kindness, "See, everything worked out. You're going to be just fine, baby. You're a fighter. You always were." And something in the word fine, the same fine my father had used to wave off 2 years of my life, made me look up at her. And I asked her quietly, no heat in it at all, "Mom, did you stop paying my premium on purpose?" The lounge didn't go silent in a movie way. The television kept murmuring. But my mother's hands stopped on my coat, and I watched her do the math, watched her decide in about 3 seconds that the safest thing was to be honest, because she had never once, in 31 years, expected the overhead to be holding the books. "Claire," she said, and her voice had that reasonable, organized warmth that I would hear in my nightmares. "We could only afford to save one of you. That's just the truth of money. And your brother's the sure thing. You were always going to land on your feet. You did, didn't you? You're standing here." She actually smiled when she said it. She thought she was being brave. She thought confessing the arithmetic was a kind of love. I didn't cry. I had done my crying at 3 in the morning in an apartment with a cat, a year and a half of it, and I had none left for that room. I reached into the tote bag, and I took out the accordion folder, and I did not throw it, and I did not raise my voice. I set 2 pieces of paper on the little table beside my wheelchair, face up, and I smoothed them flat with the side of my hand the way you'd smooth a tablecloth, the itemized bill, and the explanation of benefits, with the denial and the reason stamped down the side. "This is the bill for the body you didn't spend on," I said, $8,347. "And this is the insurance company's own statement. Mark." I turned, and I looked at my brother, who had gone very still by the vending machine. "You're going to be a doctor. You'll learn to read these. Read this one for me. Just the line down the side where it says why they didn't pay. Out loud." My father came off the window then. "Claire, this is not the place." And I slid the paper an inch toward my brother and said, still quiet, "It's exactly the place, Dad. It's the discharge lounge of the hospital where I just had the procedure you let me wait 2 years for. Read it, Mark." My mother said his name, a warning, but Mark was already picking it up. And I watched my brother, my golden, easy, sure thing brother, who had never in his life had to look directly at what he cost, read the explanation of benefits the way a decent person reads a thing heavier than he expected. He found the line. His voice came out flat and careful, the voice of a man reading something he's afraid of. "Claim denied," he read. "Reason, coverage terminated, premium unpaid." He stopped. He looked at the date on it. I watched him do the arithmetic I'd done at my kitchen table, watched him line that date up against his own first tuition payment, the one our parents had bragged about clearing, and watched the color leave his face as the 2 numbers met in the middle of him. "This is from when I started school," he said. "Not to me, to them. You stopped paying her insurance. The same month. You told me the scholarship covered me. There was no scholarship. It was..." He looked at the bill, at the $8,347, then at me in the wheelchair, then at our parents. It was her. "I didn't make a scene," I said to no one and everyone. "I made it undeniable. Now, I have to be careful here, because this is the part of a story like mine where it usually turns into a fantasy, and I told you at the start I'd give you the truth. That folder did not put 2 years back in my body. The paper did not undo the months on the cheaper medication or the procedure I had too late. And I will not stand here and tell you my heart is as strong as it would have been if they'd fought for me from the first. It isn't. The damage that got done in those 2 years is done, and I live inside it, and no document on a discharge lounge table changes that. What the paper did was something quieter, and I've come to think more important. It moved the truth out of the place where it was just a sick girl's say-so against her organized, reasonable parents, and into a room where the insurer's own ink lay flat on the table and could not be soothed away with, "These things take time, baby." In that light, my mother's brave little arithmetic could not hold. It was just what it was, a choice written down between 2 of her children, The first thing I did after was nothing dramatic at all. I went home to my apartment with my cat, on my own insurance, in my own name. I let myself heal from the procedure. And I did not call my parents, and I did not call a lawyer in a rage. I called Diane, who picked up on the first ring because she'd been sitting by the phone the way she said she would, and I told her it was done, and that Mark had read it out loud, and there was a long breath on her end, and then she said, "Good. Now the hard part. Now you decide who you want to be on the other side of it because the paper's done its job and it can't tell you that." I did go to a lawyer eventually, a plain-spoken woman who looked through my accordion folder slowly and set her glasses down and told me what I half knew, that there are words the law has for a policyholder who quietly drops a dependent's coverage and lets the bills fall on her, and a few more words for doing it while telling her it's handled, and that I had, without meaning to, built one of the cleanest records of it she'd seen because I'd kept the dates. She asked me who'd taught me to keep them like that, and I said my aunt, who works in hospital billing, and the lawyer almost smiled and said, "Your aunt did you a service most lawyers couldn't." She also told me the honest thing, that suing my own parents would cost me years and a piece of my heart I needed for healing, and that I should decide what I actually wanted, which is not the same question as what they deserved. What I wanted, it turned out, was not to bury them. I want you to hear that, because I know some of you wanted the courtroom, the judgment, the public ruin, and I understand the wanting. I had it too at 3 a.m, but I had spent 2 years being defined by a number on a scale, and I was not going to spend the rest of my life being a number on a different one. So I did the quietest, hardest thing. I set a door and a lock, and I kept the key. I told my parents, once plainly in writing so there'd be no calm reinterpretation later, that I knew exactly what they had done, that the paper existed and was copied and kept, and that I was not going to drag them through a court for it. And then I told them the boundary, which was this: they would never again stand between me and my own life. Not my insurance, not my mail, not my doctors, not one decision about my body. They were not the policyholders of me anymore. They could be in my life. I did not wall them out entirely, because they're my parents, and the girl who wanted the hand on her face is still somewhere in me, and I've made my peace with her. But they would be in it the way you let someone into a house where you've changed the locks and you hold the only key. They could come to the table. They could not come near the till of my health again, ever. And if they ever told another soul that they'd taken care of me, I would simply mail that soul the $8,347 truth. Doors, not walls. But the door has a lock now, and the lock is mine. The consequences rippled the way water does, slow and then all at once. My mother cried and called me cruel for keeping the paper, which is the thing people say when the paper is the only part of the story they can't rewrite. My father said nothing, which is the most honest thing he's done in years. But the part they hadn't counted on was the rest of the family, because a thing like this does not stay in a discharge lounge. Diane, who had stayed quiet for 2 years on the right side of suspicion, did not stay quiet anymore. Not to ruin her sister, but because she would not sit at a holiday table and let the smooth surface close back over me the way it had closed over a keyboard when I was 12. She told the truth where it needed to be known, plainly, once. And then she let it sit, and the smooth surface did not close back over. An uncle who'd always taken my mother's version stopped taking it. The story my parents had told about themselves for 31 years, that they were the careful, sacrificing, responsible ones, cracked down the side like the EOB had a reason code for it too, and there was no appealing that denial either. My mother lost the thing she had spent my whole childhood protecting, which was the right to be seen as the good one. That cost her more than the $8,000 ever would have. And Mark was the one it broke open. He left that discharge lounge a different man than he walked in. He's still in medical school. He's going to be a doctor, the sure thing, just like they said. But he calls me now, real calls. And once he said the thing I didn't know I'd needed, which was, I didn't know what I was standing on. I thought it was a scholarship. It was you. I'm sorry it was you." He did one more thing, quietly, that I'll tell you because it closed a circle I didn't know was open. He went to Diane, the aunt nobody in that family had ever quite credited, and he thanked her, for me, for keeping me upright when he was too busy being gilded to notice the cost. The two people in that family who'd been written off, the divorced aunt who worked nights in billing and the daughter who was overhead, turned out to be the spine of the whole thing. You can't give a brother his innocence back any more than you can give a heart back its 2 years. But you can let him stand beside you in the new arrangement, key in your own hand, and build something truer on the cleared ground. We're doing that, the three of us. Me, Mark, and Diane, who comes for coffee now and sits in the good chair. Slowly. It's the warm thing that came out of the cold paper. So let me come back to you in the chair, with the coffee gone lukewarm the way it does when a story runs long. If there's someone in your family who decided quietly, with a calculator, that you were the overhead and not the investment, who managed you so gently you ended up grateful for it, I want you to hear the one thing the folder taught me. You do not have to scream. You do not have to match their volume or sync to their arithmetic. You keep the truth where they can't soothe it away. You take back the keys to your own life one quiet decision at a time. And you wait, calm, until everyone you need is standing in the one room where the paper can speak instead of you. And then you let it speak. Not to ruin them, to make it undeniable. And if there's a Diane in your life, somebody on the edge of the family who once told you to keep your ugly little statements in a drawer, call her. She saw you before the numbers did. I didn't make a scene in that discharge lounge. I made it undeniable, and then I made it survivable, for me. I have my own insurance now, paid by me, mailed to me. I have a heart that I tend myself, with a doctor who fights for it, and a little device in my chest that keeps the rhythm steady through the nights the house gets too quiet, and it still does get too quiet. On those nights, I take the postmarked envelope out of the drawer, the copy I mailed myself and never opened, and I don't open it even now. I just hold it, the way you hold a stone in your coat, not because you mean to throw it, but because some nights its weight is the only thing that tells you you were right, and you weren't the overhead, and you were always worth saving. There's another thread I've been turning over, and I'll tell it to you next time we sit. You remember the woman in the armchair, the one who pressed 2 20s into my 12-year-old hand and told me to buy myself the keyboard? My grandmother. There was a second thing in that tangled batch of mail, not the explanation of benefits. A letter in her hand dated the year before any of this that says she left money specifically for Claire's medical needs, should they ever arise. Money I never saw a dollar of. The woman who put her thumb on my side of the scale when I was 12 had tried to do it one more time, from further away than anyone can reach back from, and somebody intercepted the scale. I'm still deciding what to do with what that letter proves and about whose hands it had to pass through to disappear. Come sit with me when I am. For now, it's enough that you came and sat through this one with me. Doors, not walls. For the people who will ask in the daylight, and a locked till for the ones who do their arithmetic in the dark. Rinse out your cup. Leave a light on for somebody who's lying awake doing the math on what they were told was love. And come back and sit with me again soon.